A public holiday. Of course, I didn't realize when I scheduled this that it was a public holiday, but here we are. Okay, we're going to dive right in. And today, our focus is very much around subtle anatomy and the subtle body. So I'm going to pop the link to the landing page in the chat here, which is where all of our recordings are, but it's also where you'll be able to download today's handout, which actually is quite important because it's a visual and it will be very helpful for you to be able to look at it as I'm talking. So I'm going to ask you to just jump over there onto that page now and grab the handout for session 2, which is today. And as you're doing that, I'd like to share with you a short reading. And this reading comes from my book, Mindful Living. It's published in 2019. And it really just sets the context for our session today. So it kind of gives a context. It's my words. So I'm reading my own words, but this, I put a lot of time and energy into writing this. So it explains what I want to share with you today in a way that's very clear, I hope. So it starts with a quote from Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. And she says, just as there exists in writing a literal truth and a poetic truth, there also exists in a human being a literal anatomy and a poetic anatomy. One you can see and one you cannot. One is made of bones and teeth and flesh. The other is made of energy and memory and faith. But they are both equally true. I just love this so much. Like I couldn't have expressed it better myself. I just think she absolutely nails it. I'm going to read it one more time. Just let these words sink in. What I love about it particularly is it's not a one or the other paradigm. She's created a beautiful way for us seeing the subtle body and the anatomical body in connection to and in resonance with one another. Just as there exists in writing a literal truth and a poetic truth, there also exists in a human being a literal anatomy and a poetic anatomy, one you can see and one you cannot. One is made of bones and teeth and flesh, and the other is made of energy and memory and faith, but they are both equally true. And then these are my words. Recently, a friend recommended I check out an art exhibition in my local area. The work on display featured landscapes of Australian sacred sites and areas of natural beauty, of which Australia is blessed with many. On one side of the exhibition were the Western artists' interpretations of a particular area, beautiful depictions of trees and flowers, sunsets, flora and fauna. On the other side of the exhibition were Aboriginal and Indigenous works representing the exact same locations as the Western artists, which showed the same landscapes in very different ways. Waterholes were highlighted, as were dwellings where people lived, food sources, and animals were also featured. The paintings were almost like very beautiful maps or guides to the area, totally different in focus from the classical colonial landscape interpretations. My friend and I chatted about the exhibition, and she described that looking at these pieces of art, works which were of exactly the same subject, yet so compelling in their differences, made her feel as if the two groups of artists were divided by a glass wall. She described feeling as if each group were pressed up against the glass, straining almost to pass through the barrier and see the world through the eyes of another. But the cultural, historical, and ancestral backgrounds of each meant that the lenses through which the world is seen were vastly different and largely impenetrable by the other group. It takes a certain kind of magic and a very special kind of artist to be able to transmute through glass walls, but it is possible. And this is one of the goals of good art, to help us see the world through another's eyes. We know that the goal of yoga is to know and feel in our very core the experience of oneness of being. Oneness as a phenomena exists at all times outside of our ability to perceive it. We know that we're all intrinsically linked and we're all part of the web of life, but we forget because we've been conditioned to see ourselves as separate, and we've been born into this container of flesh and blood and bones, and we feel it's ours and it's separate to someone else. To know oneness of being is to experience the dissolving of this separation. Some call it enlightenment or liberation. Just as there are metaphorical glass walls that divide us and prevent us from seeing the world through the eyes of another, so there are glass walls within us that divide one part of us from another. The wall between mind and body is an obvious one, and there is also a wall that separates the subtle world from the gross material plane. So, as Western people, we have largely been conditioned to view our bodies as autonomously like self-contained, and also as a embodied kind of construct that encapsulates who we are, right? Our bodies represent who we are. And we haven't been, for the most part, I mean, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, we haven't been raised, certainly culturally, and most of us individually, to see ourselves as energetic beings. Like, for example, another example I can give, the Indigenous examples are really good, Indigenous Australia, but we could also think about Central and South America, where many people in Indigenous cultures would think of themselves as having a spirit animal, right? You would be born into a culture, and it would be normalized within that culture in your family that you have like a totem or a spirit animal that kind of is connected to the essence or the energy of who you are. And these are different ways of thinking about who we are as people, and they're much more on the energetic plane. And just to repeat myself, because I think it's really important, it's not one or the other, right? I mean, I'm still completely on board with the idea that we have, a heart that's pumping blood around the body, and lungs that are helping us breathe, and different organs that are doing different jobs. Like, this is obviously a scientific reality. And at the same time, interconnected with that, we have energy in the body that is doing different things at all times. And because of our culture and because of the way that we've been raised, generally speaking, we don't have a framework or a map for that. So much so that many people within our culture would argue that it doesn't even exist, that this landscape of the subtle body is woo-woo, made up, fabricated, just doesn't exist. And when we look at the 5 koshas within yoga, which if you've been studying with me for any time at all, you've heard me talk about again and again and again, we have physical body at the beginning, then we have energy body, then we have the mind, emotions and feelings, and the spirit and the soul, right? Energy body is number 2 in the yogic framework. It was nothing special, right? Your subtle body was just part of who you are. Like, if someone hurt your feelings, you'd feel it in your heart. And that's a manifestation of Anahata chakra being shut down, being hurt, being saddened. If someone lied to you and then you found out that you'd been cheated or lied to, you'd feel it in your solar plexus. Manipura chakra would be impacted by that feeling of, oh, I've been lied to, I've been let down. Right. And it's not seen as being anything esoteric or woo or anything other than different than if you cut your finger and it starts bleeding, that's because your heart is pumping blood around your body and the blood's going to start being released through the wound. So I really want to start by setting that foundation today of the idea that if you can really open and expand your mind and your way of thinking, the subtle body is nothing special. We all have one, and it's in operation all the time. It's just been largely ignored by most of us. And so we have to relearn. And one of the things that I have spent the last couple of decades doing in my own yoga practice and in my own meditation and my own study of Ayurveda is really being fascinated by this idea of the subtle body, what it is, where it is, how I can access it, and how I can start to map it out. And I've studied with many, many different teachers over, tens of years. And as I said in the last session, in the last few years, really started to trust my own intuition and my own sense of sort of understanding and connection to this subtle body, and started drawing out my own maps or my own ideas of what this looked like. And for a very long time, years, that was done privately and wasn't ever something I thought that I would share with my community or with other people. Like, it was very much just my own journaling process, I guess you could say. But now there are a few of those maps that I've created and worked with over enough time that I really feel excited to share them with you. And my hope is that my deepest hope is that they will inspire you to make your own investigation and to drop into your own subtle body and to start to notice, because my map isn't your map, right? I'm going to share my map with you, and there are some guiding sort of markers in the sand as we go that are going to be the same for everybody, and most of these come from the yogic traditions, but the way they're felt and embodied is going to be different for each person. So this is really to give you a taste of what you could begin to explore within your own subtle body. And the biggest stumbling block that, in my experience, that Western women have to this is not trusting their own feedback loops, right? Like not trusting what they can feel, what they can sense, what arises in meditation, what, not even in meditation, what arises when you're lining up at the post office or talking to a friend or, in the shower. Like, it's not necessarily that you have to sit and kind of formally download this information. Sometimes it becomes available in the most mundane moments and the dots connect. And it's literally like putting together a jigsaw puzzle or connecting dots in a dot to dot picture that we used to do when we were kids. The image starts to come together. And what I'm going to share with you today is very much still a work in progress. It's not by any means a complete body of work. It just isn't. It's a musing, it's an exploration, it's a work in progress. So for those of you who joined us a little bit late, I'll just pop it in the chat one more time. I want you to have the image in front of you as I'm talking today, which is the Tree of Life image. It's the download or the handout that goes with session 2 on the Ayurveda Magic page. So it would be great if you can have that in front of you. So first of all, I've called this the Tree of Life, which is just sort of a general name for a series of images that represent subtle body or represent movement of energy on the healing journey. So what this particular illustration or diagram represents is, as human beings, how do we heal and how do we come into balance when there is disease? And by disease, like, I literally mean that word broken down: ease, comfort, and it's not happening, like disease. It's the opposite of easeful. So that could be in your mental health, it could be in your emotional realm, it could be in your physical body, it could be anything from literally cancer to Alzheimer's or just depression or just feeling a bit off, and everything and anything in between. And again, I'll just caveat it by saying, this is my interpretation, it's my ideas, and yours will be very different. So it's an exploration. It's certainly not a, that this is set in stone. And much of the content in this diagram, this illustration, does come from scripture, and some of it doesn't. So it's sort of a mishmash. And one of the reasons I was hesitant to share this work for a while, and also just didn't feel particularly confident about sharing it. It's like a little bit of a cultural appropriation piece, because there's a question in my mind about who am I to study the scriptures, study subtle anatomy, and then make up my own version, right? Like, there's something in that feels a little bit arrogant or a little bit inappropriate or a little bit appropriating. But then the question also comes, who am I not to? Like, I've been a yogi my whole life, and I'm truly deeply dedicated to these teachings. And it's with great respect and with an open mind that I have done this investigation. So why not own it and share it and be open to the idea that, maybe some of it's not quite right, or some of it will change, or some of it doesn't perfectly reflect every scripture. But one thing I can tell you, from having studied Vedic literature and scriptures and yoga history for a very long time, is the world of yoga philosophy is riddled with contradictions and differences of opinion. Like there are so many different ways to interpret the body, interpret our health, interpret, I mean, almost anything. And some of the schools of philosophy within Vedanta directly contradict each other. So I'm just throwing my little tiny, tiny droplet into the vast ocean. So let's dive in. If we see ourselves, so in some ways, this tree of life, actually represents a human body. It actually represents how we are presenced on the planet in relationship to the infinite or the sky above and the earth below. And I often have this image, and actually this is very present in tarot as well, which I'm kind of interested in as a sort of side interest. And anyone that knows about tarot might know about this, that there's this idea that there is whatever is available to be seen to the outside world, which is the tree itself or the plant itself. And then, of course, there's the network of roots underneath the earth, which isn't visible. But it's the network of roots underneath the earth that sustains the life and energy of the tree above. Right? If you are digging and you damage the root system of a plant, the plant will shrivel up and die. It might still look perfect for a few days above the earth, but if the roots have been damaged enough underneath, the plant's gonna suffer. And it's exactly the same for us as human beings in my contemplation, which is that the way we present to the world and the way that the tree of who we are, the plant of who we are, is deeply impacted by what's going on beneath the surface and what that looks like. Now, in Ayurveda, we have a system of teachings known as the dhatus. And the dhatus are badly translated, in my opinion, as being the tissues of the body. We often hear this word tissues. I'll write dhatu in the chat. Dhatus. So you'll see in many of the scriptures and literature and books that they're called the tissues. And that's because the dhatus relate to things like our bones, our blood, our sexual, like the sperm and the ovum, our lubrication, like synovial fluid, lymph, like all of these different things are part of the dhatus. So typical kind of Western approach, we translate it just only with the physical body in mind, right? Oh, that's the bones, that's the lymph, that's the blood. And it's such a poor translation because actually what the dhatus, there is no word in English that is a good translation for dhatu. The dhatus are the roots. They're the depths of who we are. They're the unseen elements that manifest in the form of the tree that then is exposed to the world. Now, some of that happens on the physical realm. So some of the elements of the dhatu is your blood nourished and strong? Is your lymphatic system able to fight off disease? Is your synovial fluid lubricated so you're not all creaky and crunchy when you're moving around? And it literally has its physical manifestation. But some of it is also energetic, right? Which is if the root itself is diseased, the tree cannot flourish. So if there is, for example, a deep depression in a person, the physical manifestation could be healthy, but the tree itself will not thrive because the dhatus, the hidden root system below is withering away. It's in darkness. It's not thriving. And there's a sort of extension of this that there's the idea with a lot of plants, particularly weeds actually, that they have a big thick root that's known as the taproot. I don't know if you've ever tried to pull up a dandelion plant, which is a good example. And so often, especially if it hasn't rained, you go to pull it and it just breaks off and you know it's going to come back within a week because the root is still in place. And actually you have to dig quite deep to get the taproot, the big root, out of the earth. And so the taproot of our energy bodies gets stronger and deeper according to the energy with which we align it. And it's sort of, I think of it like a spiral, and you'll see on the diagram, it's drawn like a zigzag, like a zigzaggy spiral. So what does this mean in practical terms? It means that, and we've all got examples of this in our lives, when you're on a good roll with your health and your wellness, whether that's mental or physical, think the upward spiral occurs, right? The spiral is nourishing. So you make good food choices, you feel really well. So you make better food choices, or you drink less alcohol or caffeine, you feel really good. And you feel like, actually, I don't need that second cup of coffee, or I don't need that glass of wine this evening. And so the spiral is kind of like nourishing, and the habits and the choices are creating a taproot or a foundation that's really strong and solid and stable and nourishing. On the other hand, when we get into negative habits or negative health patternings, like, I don't know, could be not exercising or overeating or drinking too much wine or whatever it might be, then the spiral downwards is harder and harder to get out of. And the deeper we get, the more difficult it is. And I think of my father-in-law, and some of you will have heard me tell this story before, who died at 96 and had been a smoker since he was 13 years old. He fought in World War II in Greece. And the doctors told him after about the age of 80, we used to take him for regular health tests, and he was extremely healthy. He caught the flu at 96, and within a week he'd passed away. But, before that week, he had still been mentally completely capable, physically completely capable, incredible man. The doctors told him after about, I think it was 85 or so, don't stop smoking because your body will not handle the detoxification process. Like, we actually need you to just keep smoking now. It's been so long. And this is a good example of the taproot, right? It's like your body gets so used to functioning in dysfunction that that's what it requires. And that's what addiction is. If you know that you need 3 cups of coffee in the morning to even just feel awake, you're addicted to caffeine. The first thing you're going to do when you wake up in the morning is like, where's the coffee, or where's the, I don't know, the Red Bull or the energy drink or whatever it is. And that's keeping you at normalized. So this is when the taproot is in its kind of addictive downward spiral of poor health. So one of our projects in Ayurveda and yoga and wellness in general is to stack those positive habits to create a positive spiral, and to slowly disintegrate the stacking of the negative or the addictive. That means that taproot starts to be rotten from the core, from the inside, right? And modern books like Atomic Habits, which is a great book that talk about incremental change and lifestyle change in ways that happen through stacking habits one on top of the other, are really helpful, beautiful ways of thinking about this same paradigm in a more sort of modern psychology type of through that lens. So the dictionary definition of taproot is a straight, tapering root growing vertically downwards, centering from which rootlets spring. So from all these central habits, the foundation of health that we have, all the little subroots are splintering out, right? So let's say our health is low and our energy is low. I mean, I can speak about this for myself. I'll give a parenting example. When my energy is low, my tolerance of my children is less. So that's like one of the little subroots, right? It's like, if I'm tired because I haven't slept well, or, I've overextended myself or whatever it might be, then I'll notice that I have less capacity to be around for other people, particularly my children. So that's an example of the taproot is depleted, and then all the other things start to filter off that. What Ayurveda tells us, and this is from Charaka Samhita, so this is from the scriptures, is disease takes hold and then drives deeper and deeper and becomes harder to extract from the dhatus. So it's like the taproot becomes really difficult to pull out, and we've got to dig, we've got to excavate to pull it out. So one one thing to keep in mind around this for yourself and for others, especially if you're going to be a coach or, you know, you work with other people, is small incremental change is usually by far the best approach, because to extract toxicity from the dhatus, and by that it could be physical, like it could be what you're eating and, you know, your lifestyle, could also be your neural pathways. Right? If you have a lot of negative self-talk and your neural pathways are, in yoga, we would call it samskaras, which is the repetition that creates a groove. And you're constantly telling yourself that, you know, you are, I don't know, getting old and you don't look good anymore, let's say, as an example. And that samskara, that neural pathway is rebuilt and rebuilt and rebuilt. You can't just rip the Band-Aid off and just decide, I'm going to stop thinking those thoughts. It doesn't work like that. It's a slow, incremental, intentional, steady change. And so when we're working with others, if you're working with others as an Ayurvedic coach or as a lifestyle coach or in any other healing modality, usually what is the approach that will have the most powerful outcome is slow and steady. And it's really tempting with yourself and others when you first find these tools to go crazy and want to change everything. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've written in my diary or in my journal intentions to completely transform my entire life. You know, I'm going to get up in the morning at this time and I'm going to do these practices and I'm going to only eat these things. And you guys are smiling because I'm sure you've all done the same, right? And actually what Ayurveda tells us is this isn't the way. Start by changing one thing, two things, a small thing. Let 3 cups of coffee be 2 cups of coffee and then become 1 cup of coffee. Let persistent negative thinking become intermittent negative thinking. And then all of a sudden one day it slips away and you think, oh, I haven't had that toxic negative thought for quite some time. Or your addiction to picking up your phone and scrolling and just kind of numbing out. Maybe you do that 3 or 4 times a day and you cut down to doing it only twice a day. Slowly, slowly wins the race, especially when it comes to this work with the dhatus or the taproot of disease that really becomes embodied. I'll just pause before we move on to a different section of the tree and talk about that, and see, does anyone have any questions or any comments that you'd like to offer? Anything you'd like to share or ask? Okay, so let's move on. So if the roots are going down into the earth and the tree is growing up into the sky, then above, the umbrella above which everything happens is God or higher power or source or the universe, whatever you want to call it. The name isn't important, but this sense of a higher power, right? And the model that we're given again and again and again in many different lineages of yoga, in many different scriptures, certainly in the teachings of Ayurveda, is that through the enlightenment experience, we elevate up, right? So we're wanting, for example, to ascend through the chakras. The tree gets more and more majestic and the energy moves up. Like a seed, you know, for a seed to germinate and then burst through the earth, that's an upward moving energy. When children are born, when babies are born, at first they're unable to sit or crawl or walk, but slowly, slowly they become upright. So our predisposition as humans is to elevate upwards. And this is a movement towards God, a movement towards enlightenment, a movement towards higher power. Now, I would like to propose a sort of, not exactly a counter argument, but a rebalancing of that as the foundational teaching of yoga. And I have a bit of a theory, and it's a feminist theory, if you like, that many of these scriptures and many of the teachings, as they've been handed down to us, going all the way back to Bhagavad Gita, are written by men, created by men, and from men's bodies and minds. So most 99.9% of the yogic sages and seers and the rishis who went into the caves and the jungles and the forests and did these meditations and came up with these maps far better than I ever could, because they're living in a very pure way and without all the distractions of the modern world. But they were all men and they were in men's bodies. And so we've received this set of male oriented teachings, right? And men, by their very anatomy and design and energetic blueprint, thrust forth, right? In the sexual act, men thrust forth, like they penetrate and women receive, right? In a heterosexual encounter. And men's energy is one of, we could say, leadership, or we could say, protection, or the hunter or the warrior, but it's one of rising up and thrusting forth. And in the interpretation of enlightenment as this ever expanding desire to rise up, I feel we're very much in the masculine mode. And it actually kind of echoes the idea of capitalism too, which is like bigger, bolder, growth, upward movement, penetration, right? If we were to pause and have a divine feminine, and we spoke about this in our first session, if we were to pause and have a divine feminine approach, if we were to think about the embodiment of the goddess, like Lakshmi, for example, who protects children and protects animals and the vulnerable and invites us to see the abundance that's already present in our lives. Lakshmi energy isn't about growing up and striving and expanding. It's about, hey, hang on a minute, just hang out where you are and notice that there's already a lot of beauty and a lot of sattvic sweetness around you. And so my hypothesis, my experiment, is that as well as the enlightenment principle guiding us upward in our energy, as women, or even as balanced beings, forget about gender, but just to bring that imagery into balance, there also needs to be a descent. And if we look at historically paradigms or blueprints that have more of a feminine influence, we see there's a lot more earth-based practices. So, for example, if you look in medieval Celtic culture, like in England, where I'm from originally, like my ancestors, before pre-colonialism, before all of that happened, the witches who got burnt on the stake for the work that they were doing spent a lot of time on the earth and in the earth. They were very, very connected to the descent. And for want of a better expression, I'm calling it the womb. Like in the Tree of Life, I've written the words womb, portal, descent, creation. It's this idea that we create from the womb. We don't create from up here. Our babies aren't conceived up here. And in the divine blueprint of life, the highest of the high power that came up with this whole concept of us being able to reproduce, it happens in the womb. It happens closer to the earth. And so I believe that particularly as women, but as a species overall, there's this need to anchor the constant grasping for movement upwards into the descent into the womb. And I'll give you a good example. I'm a qualified Kundalini yoga teacher, and I studied Kundalini yoga under the Yogi Bhajan system. And, Yogi Bhajan, there's a lot of controversy around him now. He was definitely a sexual predator, and that's horrific and sad. But the teachings, in my opinion, remain robust. Like, they're very powerful teachings. And the teachings of Kundalini yoga that Yogi Bhajan taught for decades are all about, in the most extreme way, bringing energy up. It's lots of breath of fire. It's lots of Kapalabhati. It's lots of work with the arms. We're doing this type of stuff and we're doing this type of stuff, and it's up, 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 right? And it creates you get really high, which is why people love Kundalini yoga, and it got a huge following because it really, creates this kind of feeling that you're leaving your body. And it's all that masculine mode energy. It's all the up, up, up energy. But actually, what started to happen in the Kundalini yoga movement, and I saw this particularly when Kundalini yoga and raw food, which in the early 2000s, they were both so trendy. Like Kundalini yoga was exploding, and then everyone was eating a raw food diet. It was like the thing. And the combination of raw food diet and Kundalini yoga, a lot of people were going psychotic. Like literally, I'm not using that as a euphemism. Like they were literally experiencing psychosis because the body became so disassociated, or the mind and the spirit became so disassociated from the body that there's no grounding food, there's no connection to earth through the food source, and the spiritual practices are all up here. Right. So this is an example of when the energy is only in yoga, we call it prana vayu, the movement of energy upwards only. Right. The opposite is apana vayu, which is downward moving energy. So when it's all up, 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 eventually you go bananas, you go mad. Right. And even the Buddha, when he attained enlightenment, I spoke about the Buddha's story in the last session. He sat. So this is what happened to the Buddha. Very, very interesting story. Siddhartha decided he would attain enlightenment at any cost. And he went through months of vigorous austerity where he starved himself. He did basically all the Kundalini practices. He became emaciated, trying to get higher and higher and higher to eventually find God, right? Merge with the divine. And he nearly died multiple times, mostly from starvation, for this feeling of lightness, this feeling of floating away. And eventually, at some point in his great wisdom, he realized this isn't going to get me to enlightenment. It's an energetic force and it feels very compelling, but it's not enlightenment. And so he started eating and nourishing his body, and he started to kind of connect back to the earth. And then he sat under the Bodhi tree and he said, I'm going to sit here under this tree until I attain enlightenment. And in that sitting under the tree, energy drops back down in, because the tree is the earth. He's on the earth. He's no longer elevating. He's balanced that out with a conviction of, I will stay here until I attain enlightenment. And then the enlightenment experience occurred. So he's a very good example. It's very well documented through the Pali Canon that the Buddha, the historical figure, the man of the Buddha, also, really reports that this idea of the ascension isn't the only way. And okay, maybe I'm stretching a bit here and I really don't want to offend any Christians, so I'm going to have to be a little bit careful and just say this is only my interpretation, and please feel free to completely disregard it, because I'm certainly not a Christian scholar and I might be stretching here, but I'm going to throw it out there. Jesus ascended, left his body, went out and up, right? Similarly to what the Buddha experienced, similarly to what we're talking about here, which is the pranavayu experience, and then came back in, dropped back down. So even if we're just going to talk about energy, I'm not making any comment about what really happened with Jesus, because like I said, it's not my area of expertise, but just this idea of ascension followed by a coming back in, even if that's all we get from this idea that we move up and that the yoga practices help us do this. And at some point we come back in. And if you're a woman and you have a menstrual cycle or you've birthed a child, that descent is happening every month. And it's certainly happening in pregnancy and childbirth. And it's been disqualified by patriarchal systems for thousands of years in many different ways, and described as dirty or wrong or less than or basic, base. Even the yogis did it. And I really feel that in order for us to be able to thrive as mothers, as partners, as friends, as people within a community and a context of being in physical bodies, we need both. And so this is the Kundalini, and we're going to talk about this more in the last session. But this is the Kundalini, the image of the serpent, right? We see in yogic imagery that the serpent starts off coiled and then lifts up through the energy of the spine. I'm not so sure that that's the only image that's helpful. I think there might be some imagery around an ascension and a descent as well that could really serve us. And one of the very simple and practical ways that we can do this is by asking ourselves as women, and this might feel really odd in the beginning when you first start doing it, what's my womb telling me? Not what's my head telling me, not what's my heart telling me, but what's my womb telling me? And just becoming curious about that as a prompt in your life. I shared this with many of you in previous sessions, but I'll share it again because it just impacted me so much. I taught a training recently in which we went through a guided meditation process with a whole group of women. And we meditated on the womb space, on the heart space, and the head. And I asked the women to give words to describe what they felt was happening in their heart, in their head, and in their wombs. And in the head, many women said, busy, chatter, distraction, overwhelm, those types of words, which is very, in line with the way that we live and experience our lives and our mental health. And then for the heart space, there was a combination, but lots of women said things like open, expanded, gentle. There were lots of descriptive adjectives. And when it came to the womb, so many women used words like numb, empty, nothing. I mean, many women used the word empty and numb, right? It shocked me. It really did. And we don't know in the energetic portal of the womb what's going on, many of us. It's just shut down. We're not present to it. So if you get one thing out of this wacky session that I'm sharing with you today, and there's just one takeaway piece, it's like, as a woman, dropping into the womb space, feeling into it, asking that question, what am I noticing in my womb? What's my womb telling me? Even if you feel weird asking that question, and inviting that feedback loop. Let me just pause and have a look in the chat, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the doshas in this diagram and the masculine, feminine. Yeah, Chelsea, beautiful. So she's saying that she's prepping for our cleanse, which we'll be doing inside Bhakti Club next week. She went to 1 coffee daily, then chai, then turmeric latte. Yeah, slowly. It's perfect. And Kat's saying, it's so interesting that you're saying that, because an American Kundalini teacher I follow, who is female, recently spoke in a newsletter about feeling like the current evolution of energetic work is all about moving energy downward. That's so interesting. And if you have access to that newsletter, I would so love to read that. If you're able to share that with me, Kat, I would be fascinated to read that. And it's that thing, and this is another thing Elizabeth Gilbert talks about, if you've read the book Big Magic, that there's this idea that when a paradigm starts to shift within society, a lot of people start to get the same download at the same time. And it can be a bit disturbing where you've had a particular idea and then you see someone else has had it, or, a few people are having it and you're like, oh, I'm obviously not as original as I thought. Or people get upset because I think someone else is copying them. But the truth is, there's an energetic principle that happens when a paradigm starts shifting, that many people, this light switches on at the same time. So I love that. I'd love to see that and read that. And I do feel like what I'm noticing at the moment is a lot more women are doing a lot of the womb descent work. Like, that's definitely starting to happen, but not so much in the yogic field. It's a little bit like maybe in body work, or a little bit in yoga, but it's not. There's like Uma Dinsmore Tully, Jane Hardwick Collins. Like, there's a few women doing this work. Anna Davies a little bit, but in the yoga world, we've still got a long way to go. That's what I'm observing. Okay, so let's just talk briefly about the doshas and how they might fit into this imagery of the tree of life. And I'm going to assume a bit of prior knowledge here and assume that you know a little bit about the doshas and what they are. So the doshas describe a state of how we tend towards going out of balance. There are three. Pitta is fire, Vata is air, and Kapha is earth and water combined. And so depending on what your constitutional type or your doshic predisposition is, will kind of give you an indication of the way in which you're most likely to go out of balance. So for example, for me, my dominant dosha is Pitta, and so the way I most likely go out of balance is by getting inflamed, because Pitta is fire, so I get impatient, I get angry, I get hot. That's my general predisposition. And if if you're not familiar with the doshas, before diving into this more subtle exploration, you'd probably want to familiarize yourself a little bit more with the doshas. So in this tree of life model that we've got, the doshas are each one of the three doshas is essential to our well-being and our balance. And this is what we know to be true from the sort of pie chart of the doshas. Like what we're working towards, what we want to work towards, is to be tridoshic, meaning there's an equal balance. All of the elements within us are in balance: earth, fire, air, water, ether. It's all balanced together. And traditional Chinese medicine would echo the same principle, that what we're trying to do when we receive acupuncture or we work with herbs in TCM is create a balance between all the elements within the body, right? That's what we're trying to do in Ayurveda as well. So if someone's very fiery, we try to balance that by bringing in some more of the water or the earth element. If someone's very stuck in the earth, we try to balance that out by bringing in some more of the air element. So it's this constant dance of coming into balance. And in our tree of life model, where we're balancing out the elevation into the tree and the descent into the roots, we're also working with the doshas. So the Kapha dosha lives below the earth. It's the root system. And this is why Kapha people are deep thinkers, and they are slow and steady, and they are foundational. They have a certain stubbornness to them. They have a certain capacity to see things through to the end. Like they're of the earth, that element of earth and water. The heaviness is there. And it's the roots that go into the earth. Then we have Pitta, which is literally at the precipice or the meeting point between the tree and its roots, that point of germination for the seed. And this is the seed igniting. So the image, and this comes from scripture, this is like written beautifully in Charaka Samhita. The image of the seed germinating is a very Pitta image, the bursting forth into light. And this is how pittas are in the world. They have lots of ideas and it comes with a lot of energy, but they don't usually sustain the growth. That's the vata element, right? The pitta is the bursting forth, and then they kind of lose interest and they move to another thing and they burst forth with that. And they need help from the kaphas to ground and to grow. And then from this germination process, the tree itself or the plant itself grows, and that is the vata element. And if you think about a tree with lots of branches and the leaves, we've had loads of wind in Sydney recently. It's been so windy. It's so vata discombobulating. It's not my favorite at all. The leaves rustling in the branches, that's the vata element: movement, air, growth, expansion, but sometimes a little bit all over the place, right? Especially if it's extreme. Kapha below, Pitta at the point of germination, the igniting fire, vata in the tree itself. And then we have one final element that I want to bring in today, which is the idea of the masculine, feminine, or we'll call it the sun and moon. So we have obviously above the earth, the sun, which is in yogic philosophy is Pingala, which represents the masculine. And then below is the moon energy, the darkness, the feminine. And again, if we want to look at tarot, which you may or may not be interested in, but it's another way of thinking about symbolism. The sun is very much the masculine, and it's of the world and in the world, and the moon is the feminine, and it's the underworld, and it's the realm of the creative and that which is not yet germinated, but which is coming into its fruition, coming into its expression. And so in this tree of life imagery, we have also this idea of the balancing of the sun and the moon. And we'll talk more about the qualities of masculine, feminine in our future sessions. This is, you know, in the next 2 sessions, we're going to really explore more deeply. We're going to build on this model. We're going to build it out more deeply, particularly looking at the Kundalini and some of the other elements of masculine and feminine. But this is our foundational piece. Let's pause there. Does anyone have any questions? I'd love to just hear actually how that's landed for you. Like, what's come up? Does it feel resonant? Does it feel unclear? Yeah, please share just how has that landed for you? Feel free to unmute yourself and just share. I'd love to hear from you.
I'll share,
Sarah.
Katie.
Thank you.
I absolutely love the way you've spoken about Kundalini. I've been doing energy work and healing for many, many, many years now. And I had an experience years ago when I did some energy training to work with all this and exactly what you're speaking to, but the way you're sharing it is just beautiful. It's almost as though pieces and questions I had back then walked away with have just been answered. Because I remember at the end of this 6-week training period that I was in, I had this experience of a serpent snake coming through my entire body. I could see it. I could feel it. And it came right up here to here. And yet I was left with questions and fear. And I've always had that in the back of my mind as to I understand that a serpent and snake energy is very spiritual, but I guess that's why I've kept going. And I think what's coming through for me now is the importance of just continually having mentors and where you're being called to learn more to really I guess, get answers and connect the dots of all of this. So the Kundalini with the earth and all of that, it just, as you grow older, I've found now that I'm 45, I've found that it just, the way I view it all is very different to what I learnt even some 8-10 years ago and have experienced as well. So yeah, thank you. That just really, I feel a real freedom sort of coming through me in terms of, what have I been, almost like I've been holding on to a fear that I didn't quite know what the fear was, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. And, as well as seeking the guidance of teachers and mentors, which is always important, there's also, and as we get older too, there's that piece around just trusting your own body and your own intuition and asking your body, like not being afraid and asking in meditation or asking just before you fall asleep at night or in a quiet moment, what do you have to tell me? Like, what feedback is available? What's going on energetically? Even just asking, where is my energy right now? Where is my energy right now? Is it all up here? Sometimes I spend a lot of time working on my laptop, and when I stop, I can really go into the zone, and I could be like creating a new course or something like that, and I'm very like excited and focused, and I stop and I'm like, it's just like literally like I'm just a disembodied head. Like there is no body. And then I realize, oh, I'm hungry. I need to pee. I'm whatever's going on in my body, but it's just disassociated. Usually it's that, not the other way around. But, there can also be experiences of feeling very grounded, feeling very connected to earth. So just, checking in with that regularly. I think there's so much valuable feedback in that when we just get curious.
Funny you say that about questions as well. I find I'm constantly driving that with my daughters and saying, do not ever stop asking questions. And one of them called me out the other day because I just had no space. I had no capacity for anything. And I'm like, I just don't want any more questions. And then they're like, you tell us to ask them, Mummy. I'm like, yes, I do. And
in the allocated moments.
Yeah.
I totally hear you. I'm regularly put my kids on pause for questions. I'm like,
Yes.
no more questions right now. I'm done.
Yes. 5 minutes. No questions,
Yeah,
please.
I think it's fair enough. I think it's fair enough. Thank you, Sarah. Does anyone else want to share?
This is a little bit of like a jump off. I feel like not 100% related, but I was just curious, like when you were talking about the connection with Jesus and like thinking about like the upward and the downward, it just triggered for me. And I don't know a whole lot about this, so I was just curious if it's something you've ever looked into. I don't know if you're familiar with Saint Teresa of Avila. She was
Mm,
like, yeah. So like I've heard her experiences compared to like like experiencing Kundalini rising, which I
yes.
think is really interesting. So I was just
Yeah.
curious if you'd ever like heard that
Yes. I've
connection or
studied
know
it.
any. Okay.
Yes. So Saint Teresa of Avila was a Spanish nun, in the Christian nun, and she used to go into these like trances, these kind of like episodes where she'd like leave her body and then she'd get these visions and she'd go and write them all down. And they were never published in her lifetime because everybody thought she was crazy. But she wrote a book called The Interior Castle, which is amazing. It's an amazing book. And there's different translations. I really, really recommend the Mirabai Star translation. I'll write it in the chat. Uh, I feel like I'm not spelling her first name correctly, but you'll get it. Um, she does the most beautiful translation and introduction. Um, and so, I mean, one thing I can tell you about St. Teresa is that one of her visions she had in her trance-like state was she visioned a column of light rising up through her spine. And she used a lot of Christian language and iconography to describe this because obviously she was deeply, in the Christian faith. 7 different portals or doorways up through that column. Keep in mind, she would have had absolutely no access to the teachings of the chakras. Like, there's no way there'd have been a cross fertilization there. So she has herself. And what I love about that is she's one of the few women historically that gave us the framework of the chakras, independently of even the Indian, teachings from the Indian subcontinent. So, yeah, 7 energetic portals moving up through the spine, clearly outlined. They are the chakras. If you read The Interior Castle, you're reading about the chakras and her private download of the chakras. I mean, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
thank
I
you.
love her writing and her teachings. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I do kind of find it interesting that, like, to some degree, like she was allowed to share this,
Well, she wasn't
but it's
really
like,
though. And so she had to keep a lot of it private and she kept getting in trouble. And actually, if you read some of her writings, they're quite funny because a lot of them are written in journal kind of form. And she questions herself a lot. She's not like, oh my God, I'm having these amazing downloads and I'm seeing Jesus and I'm like downloading, esoteric blueprints. She's like, oh, I think I might be crazy. Of course, because she's gaslit, because she's a woman, right?
mhm,
So she's like, oh, I think I might be crazy. And I collapsed again in the church today. And the nuns had to like prop me up and take me to my room. And why does this keep happening? And what's wrong with me? And like, it's all that. And her writings are kept secret and she's scared that they might get found. And she's genuinely questioning her sanity. Like, yeah, if she was a man, I don't think it would have been the same story. I'm just going to put that out there. But, yeah, at least we do have access to her teachings, and she has been very much elevated in recent times. Like a lot of energy teachers have read and responded to her work. Another one that's really good is the woman who wrote the 7, Carolyn Myers. Took me a while there. She wrote a book about St. Teresa of Avila. I think it's called The Castle Within, or no, it's called Entering the Castle. And it's all about St. Teresa. And it's an easy read. And if you're interested in that, it's a really good one. Yeah. All right, let's wrap it up. I'll let you guys go off and enjoy the rest of your long weekend. I think we're going to get some sunny weather, which will be really nice. Just rub the palms of your hands together, bring a little heat and energy, and bring the hands into your heart. Take a couple of deep breaths. Sitting in gratitude for the teachings and for the teachers that come before us. Sitting in gratitude for the earth and the many wisdom keepers that come before us. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. May the thoughts, the words, and the actions of my own life contribute in some way to that happiness and to that freedom for all. Namaste. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.